Justice! Oh, justice! Where are you?
Lift every voice and sing.
We can't breathe.
Let it resound. I just want you to know that I see you. And I didn't know then as a kid that racists don't just die off.
We can't breathe.
They're grown. They're taught. You're not going to take this anymore. But out from a gloomy past, till now we stand at last.
We can't breathe. We.
Hey everybody, I'm Maggie Vespa in for Dan, and clearly this is the story. But you know, if things feel a bit more somber than usual, it's not just you. This week has been, in a word, heavy. And we have a lot of complex and emotional issues to wade through tonight, but we really still want to hear from you. The hashtag hasn't changed. It's still Hey Dan. Use it. We look for it. And our email also remains the same. Write us at thestory@kgw.com. We're listening, as always. And with that, let's get to our big story. And of course, there is no bigger story than what's going on right now in Minneapolis. It's something that we're all reckoning with at this point. And by now, most of you know the facts. 4 days have passed since a black man named George Floyd died after a white Minneapolis police officer kneeled on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. Floyd was heard saying, "I can't breathe," gasping for air, and screaming "Mama." That officer and 3 others who stood by were fired on Tuesday, but for days, action and justice stopped there. And every night since, Minneapolis has looked like this. Rage and grief boiled over and hit a peak last night when rioters torched a Minneapolis police precinct and they set off fireworks while it burned. The mayor ordered police to abandon that building, and he also called for justice and charges from the DA. And this morning, authorities in Minneapolis arrested the officer who knelt on Floyd. His name is Derek Chauvin, and he's been charged with third-degree murder. It's also worth noting before last night, other law enforcement organizations condemned his actions, even these Oregon departments. You can see Portland Police, Beaverton, Hillsborough, McMinnville Police, every sheriff's office in the metro area, and that's just to name a few. It was clear that what we all witnessed on Monday impacted so many. It was violent, inhumane, and unacceptable. And still, many woke up this morning kind of shaken by the chaos that they saw in Minneapolis. And we've seen some people asking why all that damage and destruction had to happen. And at least one answer comes from none other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Last night, his son tweeted this: "As my father explained during his lifetime, a riot is the language of the unheard." And it's objectively true that people of color are too often silenced. And when you have no voice, it's hard to see a path toward changing the world around you, a world that can't seem to stop killing you. And with that in mind, we're going to take a few minutes to basically, here tonight, shut up and let them be heard.
He was murdered in the streets. And I mean, you hear him crying. And I mean, everyone heard that.
They murdered my brother.
9 minutes. He's begging for his life. He's telling them, "I can't breathe."
We need justice for our loved ones just like they want it for theirs.
Let every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. I just want you to know that I see you. I see that you're not going to take this anymore. We don't have to live like this. We don't have to live like this. If you believe that, say it with me. We don't have to live like this. We don't have to live like this. And we don't have to die like this.
This kind of change only comes from the people like you to wake up and see that what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd happens a hell of a lot more than you're comfortable with seeing.
It could have just as easily have been Portland. George Floyd could have been my neighbor. Over and over and over again, Black people have been killed, and there has been silence. Black people are tired. Black people are exhausted by racism.
What do we want? When do we want it? What do you want? When do we want it?
We are the chastening rod.
If we are to move forward together, you need to know who we are. And more than that, you need to know that this is our country. This is the space, come on, that we were brought to unjustly and built while you watched.
Please, please, please stop killing us.
Every day, I'm being haunted as prey. I just wanna live.
We, people of color, and many of our white brothers and sisters say we can't breathe. We can't breathe. We can't breathe. We.
So that rally here in Portland today was hosted by the NAACP, and it was dubbed a eulogy for Black America. And by the way, I streamed the whole thing on my Facebook page if you want to see it for yourself. A note, though, you probably noticed there were several pictures up on that stage. One was George Floyd's, and then there were multiple others. So just for reference here, there was a photo of Ahmaud Arbery. He was jogging in Georgia when he was shot by two white men. He was 25, and it happened in February. Those men now face murder charges. And the woman you saw is Breonna Taylor. She was an EMT in Kentucky, and she was killed in the crossfire during a gunfight between police and her boyfriend in her own home. Police were executing a search warrant on the home amid a narcotics investigation because they thought someone else was using that home to store drugs. Breonna was 26. So sticking with our coverage of Minneapolis, fresh off of slapping President Trump with a fact-check label, Twitter flexed its muscle again last night after the president took to his favorite platform to warn that, quote, looting leads to shooting. Since then, Twitter flagged these two tweets from the president for violating its rules about glorifying violence. For the Twitter novices out there, that basically means Twitter didn't take the tweets down, but they made it so that you have to read a warning about the violence in them and then click again to read what the president wrote. This morning, President Trump tried to clarify that he wasn't threatening violence. He was just stating a fact. So what's not up for debate, though, is the origin of the president's choice of rhyme, that looting leads to shooting. He didn't make that up. It's been used before, albeit decades ago. And to that point, we think this story in the Washington Post is really worth your time because it's a useful history lesson on the phrase, which actually originated with the police chief in 1960s Miami. Specifically, in 1967, Chief Walter Headley, quote, declared war on crime in Miami's black neighborhoods, saying police would use shotguns and dogs at his command. And yes, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, another phrase the president used in his tweets. A year later, Miami hosted the Republican National Convention, and 3 days of violent protests exploded. 3 people died, and Chief Headley reiterated his officers, quote, know what to do. And again, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Before an investigation into Headley's threats could be released, he died in 1968. And the whole story in the Post is really fascinating, and we think definitely worth your time. And one final note on this story. Hours before the state of Minneapolis arrested Derek Chauvin, it arrested 3 different people. Only this one played out on live television.
This is the 4 of us. We are one team. Just put us back where you want us. We are getting out of your way, so just let us know. We walked away. I'm sorry?
You're under arrest.
Okay. Do you mind telling me why I'm under arrest, sir?
about to be arrested.
So that is a team of journalists from CNN being surrounded and then arrested by Minnesota State Patrol in the middle of their live broadcast. The reporter, Omar Jimenez, can be heard several times throughout that whole video saying the crew was moving out of the way of advancing officers when they were surrounded. And then he asks police, who were in the process of clearing protesters off the streets, where they should go. Jimenez also repeatedly identifies himself as media, and police also, by the way, arrested his producer and his photographer. And as you can probably see by this shot, they carried the camera away themselves, still broadcasting live, and then put it on the ground sideways. A few hours later, the crew was released, and Minnesota State Patrol tweeting that they made that call once they confirmed that they were members of the media. Again, Jimenez said that. And again, we know that because that all happened on live TV. Everybody heard it. Jimenez later sent out this tweet himself, a photo of him and the crew preparing to broadcast again, saying, "And we're back." By then, his colleagues at CNN had revealed that actually a second reporter had been surrounded by police nearby around the same time. But once he said he was media, police told him he could stay. That reporter's name is Josh Campbell. He's on the right side of your screen, and as you can see, he is white. Jimenez, you may have noticed, is black. Minnesota's governor, the one who ordered Jimenez and his crew be released, quickly apologized publicly for the arrest, saying we have got to ensure that there is a safe spot for journalism to tell this story. And all I can say is thank goodness those cameras were rolling when that happened, and thank goodness cameras were rolling on George Floyd when he died. Otherwise, we might not be covering this story at all.
When the story continues.
Here's a man that already has social distancing because most people are afraid of him.
They call me Helmet John Albert Weddle, a colorful character.
Documenting the life that goes on when the rest of Astoria is home.
Let's don't forget this whole group of people that live on our streets, live in our communities.
To be black in America means to fight harder for what other communities take for granted. I want to warn you, beloved community, we cannot view this as a ceiling when it's no more than a dance floor. We can't start shouting hallelujah just yet. For the fundamental act of justice should be expected for all people. We can't stop now. Somebody say we can't stop now.
Hey everybody, welcome back. So I'm Maggie Vespa, again in for Dan while he enjoys some time off. And I really want to get right to this next story because honestly, it is just so good. And we could all use a good story here tonight. Laurel Porter did it actually, so you know it's got to be good, right, Laurel? Obviously, you know, the Oregon coast hasn't completely flipped on the open sign just yet, but one city I hear has kind of like a local celebrity, and they wanted to safely celebrate him.
Well, first of all, that's so kind of you, but we couldn't go wrong with this story. We're talking about the town of Astoria during the governor's stay-at-home orders. When everything was locked up tight, something wonderful happened. People came out of their houses to rally around a man who doesn't have a house. But in Astoria, he does have a home.
Man, it's so quiet out.
In Astoria, Oregon, near where the mighty Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean.
Look at this. There's not a soul. There's not a car to be seen.
The place Lewis and Clark once explored.
Nobody walking.
More than 200 years later, during the height of a historic pandemic.
Yeah. It's devastated the local economy here.
Another well-known local figure.
It's really devastating. It's literally killing people.
Explores the streets of Astoria alone. This is the unlikely story of a man known as...
They call me Helmet John Albert Weddle, a colorful character.
Helmet John, for the red motorcycle helmet he sometimes wears for protection.
It's real life.
And how he's helping his town during the age of social distancing rediscover what home is.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
For a man without a house, Helmet John is home.
I'm outdoors in the winter, too, you know. Oh, it's rain, snow, sleet, or hail. Here he is.
As rough as John's life
tough.
is, that laugh punctuates nearly everything he says. It's a life the 73-year-old chooses to live.
My territory ranges from 2nd to 22nd or 24th, I guess it is. Yeah.
But there's a lot more to John Albert Waddell.
I have a master's in physics at Berkeley. I have a master's in business at New York University Business School. So I have enough theoretical background to analyze what's going on here.
And Helmut John's story got the attention of another of Astoria's colorful citizens. Jeff Daly, known for restoring parts of a town's history, including the Joy Train.
You want to go check out his wagon?
The Joy Train, our tool that we get around in.
A former American Legion parade float.
I've known John for about 5 years. Being a cameraman, photographer, how could you not be attracted to him?
Daly also happens to be a filmmaker.
Let's don't forget this whole group of people that live on our streets, live in our communities.
So that idea inspired Jeff to spend weeks chronicling Helmut John's wanderings during a pandemic.
Here's a man that already has social distancing because most people are afraid of him.
Creating a 30-minute documentary.
What's up, John?
How Waddell transformed from a person who was born into the American dream to Astoria's most recognizable homeless figure, the locals call Helmut John, is both a heartbreak and a mystery. The kind of mystery that creates urban legends.
Welcome to the movies.
And that legend...
Have you seen the film yet?
...is hitting the big screen.
It's nice. It's good they do something like that for him.
We put a projector back here.
Or at least the makeshift one on the side of the American Legion building.
It's perfect. We project the Helmut John movie onto this wall.
In the old Safeway parking lot.
Yeah, Astoria thing.
A place other people without homes sometimes gather. And of course, they know John.
He's a good person.
There's the ex-mayor. All you got to say is Helmut John a movie and people show up. See you at the movies. Checking it out to see where their spot's going to be.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending tonight's film, Helmut John.
When the sun goes down.
Oh, this is a good place to be, you bet. No better spot in the world, right here.
A pop-up drive-in movie.
Yep.
I wanted to show the film essentially in John's living room.
It's going to start in the next 15-20 minutes. Uh-huh.
What movie is it?
It's about John up there. It's a 30-minute movie about John. Yeah.
We're ready. Can I take an M&M's, please?
John's living room.
Thank you, guys.
Transformed into a theater.
All the virtual hugs. Uh-huh. And 97.3 is your station.
Super. Thank you very much.
And audio broadcast on a low-wattage FM transmitter.
Yeah, we're going to try and tune up the radio and get connected here.
People can listen to on their car radio.
But it's smarter than... Wait, it's 90.7, yeah?
No, 97.
All safely, physically distanced apart.
I'm supposed to know that.
What's the number? Oh, okay, I think we got it. 97.
The perfect escape for people who have been isolated at home.
We're pretty bored.
It just gives us a chance, you know, from the stay-at-home order to come out and learn, a little bit of his background. It was fascinating.
I think that we can come here and see Helmut John and watch the movie and all about him.
I think he is one of the main staples for Astoria, for sure, and I think it's about time the community is actually showing that he is that important. Definitely.
First of all, to get out of the house, that's number one, and number two is to learn about John Waddell.
We love him.
He's a great guy.
After the previews, other short films Daly directed. Helmut John is ready for the main event.
Ready, John?
Ready.
And his silver screen debut. It may not be a Hollywood blockbuster.
There are portions of his history that Waddell selectively tells people about himself.
But on this night, Helmut John is a box office draw.
He's laughing at himself. It's the cutest thing in the world.
Ah, what a great insight into the guy. Yeah.
Astoria is the town that affectionately gave Waddell his moniker, Helmut John.
You're sitting in his house right now. This is it.
But overall, he's happy and content.
I think the best part is listening to his own commentary as he's watching it.
Waddell is a charismatic person who is easy to like.
It's his choice to live as he lives.
Astoria is John's home, and a home is where you're loved.
He just is robust about life.
He's the one with the secret sauce. Be yourself. Keep laughing.
And as the credits roll, the audience responds in appreciation for Helmet John.
His awareness of the world from a different perspective, you have to acknowledge it.
As he gathers his belongings,
There, John. Take care of yourself, man.
and quietly slips away to find a place to lay his head for the night.
I think after people see this movie, he can stay pretty much anywhere he wants tonight.
This former physicist knows, even during a pandemic, the most important laws in nature aren't the forces that pull us apart,
Much love.
but the gravitational pull
Thanks for coming.
that brings us together.
It's all of our houses. This is our place right here.
In the place we call home.
Night, John.
That's it. Yes, sir.
Helmet John and Jeff Daly just make me smile. I worked with one of our amazing KGW photojournalists, Kurt Austin, on that story. Thank you, Kurt. Over 3 weekends, Daly's pop-up drive-in movie showing the Helmet John documentary raised $6,500 for the local United Way and the charities it supports. And Maggie, if you'd like to see Jeff Daly's entire documentary, 30-minute film on Helmet John, we have a link to it in our story on KGW.com right now.
I'd love to see it. And we were saying during the piece, and I say this because John is so happy, and he says multiple times he chooses it. That was a beautiful venue for a movie about someone who lives outside, for a documentary about someone who embraces that life. So Laurel, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. It was a joy to do.
We loved it. Thank you. All right, guys, there is still time to read some of your comments here on the story. It's been a heavy show. It's been a heavy week, because I'm sure you have a lot on your mind. Use the hashtag #HeyDan, and we're finishing the story after the break.
We must act, and we must have allies. We must have allies that look like everybody out here today from every community of color. That should be our ally. Everyone here should be an ally. I see a lot of lawn signs. I got to tell you, Black Lives Matter has got to be more than just a virtue signaling lawn sign.
Hey guys, welcome back. So safe to say this has been one of the heaviest episodes of the story since we launched the show in February, and Dan's not even here for it. So we're trying our best to keep the tone on point here. We do want to end on a really positive note, at least, positive for this guy. Maybe it's a little bit sad for us, but we're cheering for him. This man's name is Michael Rollins, and most of us just call him Rollins. And today was his last day at KGW because he is retiring. You might not know his face, but I guarantee you know his words. Rollins has been one of our incredible digital producers for 11 years, and he's been an Oregon journalist for far longer. Here is Rollins in 1978 as, in his words, a cub reporter for what is now the Statesman Journal, end quote. He's big on quotes. At the time, he says he owned 4 Afro combs. Yeah, but unfortunately, the polyester pants have gone to the landfill since. We would have loved those. Seriously though, Rollins, all our best to you and your family. You will be so missed, and we appreciate all your hard work. All right, guys, I want to read just a couple of your comments here. We got one from Twitter. Hey, Dan, thank you so much for your detailed reporting tonight on the horrific events of this week. I've learned a great deal more. And guys, we are so glad that you've been listening, and we're so glad that you gained something from it. We really tried to provide it with context, but please let us know if you want to know more about any layer of this story, because there are so many, especially after we've just been calling it the heavy week that we've had. So with that, that is the end of the story on this Friday night. The news at 6:30 is next.
The problem is that the outrage only lasts as long as the video is being distributed. By next week, people will be back to their life, and meanwhile, Black lives will still be in danger. And what I need today is a commitment from people that don't look like me, that they will demand that Black lives matter.